Welcome to the WTF Show. My name is Luke Lalonde and I will be your host. We are here every week to discuss hot topics in the realms of wealth, truth, and faith. In wealth, we dive deep into business, currency, economics, and how to make it financially in today's world. For truth, we love to ask the hard questions. We believe in debate and hearing all sides of the story, and even better, coming up with solutions. In faith, we talk about God and His promises, religions, and how faith will guide us through this now upside down world. Today, we have two very special guests: Bernard, the Director of Land Interest for Estates Foundation, and Angela, the Director of Sovereign by Design. But before we get started, I would love to invite Dan Bagan to lead us into prayer.
Good afternoon, folks. It's wonderful to be here. Wonderful to be invited to come and pray with you folks, to open the door, to give us a glimpse at what heaven wants for a program like this. And I'm excited to see what God will do through a program like this, through my very special friends Rick Burley and Luke Lalonde, especially Rick, who him and I have known each other since, as the expression goes, since Jesus was a boy, which isn't true, but I mean, we've known each other for a long time. Folks, my part of this is to bring prayer. Faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Now let's go that a tiny bit more. If it's impossible to please God without faith, where do you think we should start? Probably with faith. In other words, without it, it's impossible to please God. So if I start with faith, even faith as small as a mustard seed, and claim God at His word for His promises and for His power in my life, I have a good, strong starting space. So with that in mind, let's pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, I just praise you and glorify you for these people who are willing to put themselves out there in truth and love and light, and bring light to a dark, all-consumed world, Father. Let's bring your light to everything we say, everything we do, and everything we touch, because our desire is to honor you and you alone, and honor your Son, Jesus, and honor him in such a way as we know that there's only one way to heaven. And Father, we thank you for that way through your Son. So Father, take this program, use it for your benefit, use it for your glory, and bring us the right words to say at all times, so that we open doors in people's minds, in their spirits, in their bodies, for healing, for openness, for you to speak to us in a bold, rich, wonderful way. And we pray all this in the mighty and precious name of Jesus, our Savior.
Amen. Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
You betcha.
Now let's invite our special guests for today, Bernard and Angela. Welcome to the WTF Show.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Luke. Thanks for having us.
For sure. I'm very honored for having you on the show today. Angela, I'd like to start with you today. Can you tell our viewers about your journey up to starting Sovereign by Design?
Sure. So my background has really been in a variety of different businesses, marketing, and so I've been an entrepreneur for quite some time. My husband, the same. We, got onto a different couple or few different entrepreneurial paths. And through that, and during that, discovered that one of our daughters had severe allergies to a lot of foods, a lot of different foods. And through that journey of trying to figure out what the root cause was, I bumped into the wonderful product known as, not wonderful, but the product known as glyphosate. And through that journey of trying to figure out, what was going on with my daughter's gut and why she was having such severe reactions to foods, I bumped into essentially the product of glyphosate and the corruption in our farming industries and our food industries, and I did a really deep dive on that for many years. And through that journey, of course, that sent me a little bit crazy because I didn't understand why, in Canada, all our farmers were using these sprays that were basically ripping holes in our gut. And when I got to the bottom of that journey, I felt like I had identified that there was lots of corruption in the system. And at that time, I thought it was corruption. And so that led me to a path of like, how do we get out of this? How do we get out of that situation where we're dependent on our big farmers? We're dependent on trusting our local farmers. And here we have these toxic sprays that are being, put all over our food and that are harming our health of our children and ourselves. And so it was like through that journey and that dive that took me to understanding the difference between public and private. And once I got a hold of that information, a lot of things started, making sense in my brain as to why. And then I really just, it just kind of grabbed me, and I saw it as a solution for Canadians as a whole to get out of what I could see at that time. This is going back, quite a few years. What I saw as being corruption in the system, I saw this as our way to basically shift jurisdictions and take our power back. So kind of an odd way to bump into the public and the private. But from that point forward, I started seeking out people that knew more about that and that were having successes. And then I became determined to try to simplify that process and put it into step-by-step processes for Canadians at the time to move through so that we could collectively shift out of, at that time, what I thought was, just a jurisdictional shift. And that's what led me to starting Sovereign by Design.
Well, excellent. Well, so that's a great journey. We're all on a journey right now to finding out, like we especially the last 3 years. I mean, we've all found out that the system is extremely corrupt in every category, and this is why we wanted to start this show to talk about wealth, truth, and faith. And you've brought us some truth here. What can you tell us about like the mission and vision of Sovereign by Design?
Well, I mean, that is it's actually taken big shifts because initially, it really was me coming from a heart space of, hey, look what I bumped into. Oh, sorry, my doggies are going to go off here. Look what I've bumped into, and these are great revelations. And oh boy. Sorry, that's probably going to be very distracting to the audience. So initially it was about, hey, look at, I've found this great revelation, and let's get on this path and move towards taking our power back for our country. Sorry about that. And as I got, moving forward on this path and moving through the processes and sharing the information with people, I really saw that a lot of people didn't want the information, right? So my vision shifted there, and now it's more about providing a platform for people who are already looking for the truth and are already looking for solutions rather than trying to wake people up. It's about just focusing on creating the education required for us to move ourselves into a place of self-governance and self-responsibility, and through that freedom. And whoever wants to come along that path, that's the programs are there for us, right? Rather than trying to be out there and wake everybody up and feel like it's a solution for the whole country. That level of accountability and responsibility maybe is not for everybody, right? Just and I think that goes back to even opening with a prayer. A lot of people are not ready for that path, right? And so we just got to do our best and and put the information out there, and people that want to come along can come along. And so ultimately the vision for Sovereign by Design is to just continue to create that path and that education for my brothers and sisters who are out there who are wanting that, and can see the benefit of taking, self-governance to a different level for themselves.
And what are the benefits of Sovereign by Design? Because I do believe for sure that by now, if you're not awake, we're not chasing, right? We're just here for the people that, and there is a massive amount of people that are awake now, especially after 3 years and what's coming. So this is a great thing. So what are the benefits of Sovereign by Design, so that to let our guests know that'd be great to know.
Sure. So I think, having been in this on this path now for the last 7-8 years, struggling to find the information for myself that made sense, and that because there's a lot of different paths within the category of self-governance. And so you can go down some paths and you can learn about things and they're interesting, but there's not really a lot of solution in it, right? It's like interesting information, but it's not helpful. And so the goal of Sovereign by Design was, one, to simplify as much as possible the information that we're providing people to self-governance and what I would say, liberty or freedom, from what we see as a tyrannical system. So the simplified as much as possible path to getting from A to B. In addition to that, we are about support. So, we have live weekly calls with our members so that people can move through the programs where they have questions. They're not just left hanging. And so I feel like, my heart is in this for myself, my own children, and for all the children of Canada, but also I see everybody as a brother and sister. So my heart is in it. And therefore, when your heart is in it, it's not about the money. It's not about profiting. It's not about, of course, it's got to be self-sustainable, but it's about all of us as a community. And I think that there's not very many environments out there that have that heart and that desire for the support to help everybody through. And I also think that another huge benefit that people will find at Sovereign by Design is that because there's so many different paths and different opinions, like my goal has always been to find what's the streamlined path what's the fastest path to success of what we're trying to achieve. And so there's lots of fluff that you can know about, but what I try to focus on, and I know Bernard focuses on, is what works, and let's just kind of move everything else out of the way and focus on what works. And then you can go and study all you want, in your additional time to, say, where did this all start? What's the history of it? And all of that, right? You can do that outside of that if you have time and energy left. But what you'll find at Sovereign by Design is a fastest path to success for self-governance.
Well, that's fantastic. I want to join your program today. Actually, I already did, but I want everybody to join this program because of that. I mean, we want the easiest path and all the benefits and a community that supports each other. That's fantastic to hear. So you did discuss some of your goals, and I wanted to say something at the beginning. You did talk, right, the last question, sorry, you did say that it was kind of when we said a prayer, it's not for everybody. You said this program is not for everybody, and that's the truth. But because we are the Wealth, Truth, and Faith show, we really want to touch on God, on truth, on controversy, on wealth, on everything that is really turned around in today's world. So my next question really would be, I want to share some fun facts that you could teach our viewers today that maybe they don't know right? So please share some fun facts that you've learned or that your program teaches.
Well,
they don't have to be fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, fun facts. Yeah. Our idea of fun is different, right?
That's
It's
right.
subjective. So, I would say that a fun fact is, okay, like an example, a practical example of a fun fact is that there are ways of that the system that we believe that, for the most part, that, you know, the most Canadians, I'm going to put most, believe that we're in a certain system, and that system is tyrannical. And if you look at it just from from one layer, of course it looks that way. But the fun fact is that we actually already hold the power as the people. And I don't mean like, oh yeah, we people are the power. That's true collectively. But if you get yourself into a situation, say you got yourself into a foreclosure, or say you get a speeding ticket, or say you get a, there's a court case that you're facing, or and you just, this can create incredible stress on our own individual systems, our families, immediate families, our extended families. And the fun truth fact of that is that there's ways of handling that through an administrational process that is completely not stressful when you know what you're doing, and can handle those situations relatively quickly without having to, let's say the only way really in that system to remedy situations like that is through paying, right? It's through paying or pain. And the fun fact is that doesn't have to be the case. The fun fact is that we don't know the law, and when we don't know the law, we're just kind of, sheeping along. But when we learn the law, then there's just way different ways to handle that don't bring you the stress, and that aren't, draining your bank account to find the remedy in that. So yeah, I'm trying to think of the most practical for the average individual, thinking what are the benefits of this path. And I would say that that's a pretty fun fact.
That is a fun fact. Thank you for sharing that. One of our viewers has asked a question: how do you define success in terms of the fastest path to success?
I would say that success is opening up your belief system to the idea that what you maybe believe is not true. And I think that that's, when we really do that ourselves in whatever area, if you can open your belief system, because I feel like that is a very spiritual thing, that, we get locked into these belief systems. And when we lock ourselves into anything energetically or mentally, nothing else can come through, right? And so to me, that success is that when we say, you know what, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to pray about this. Maybe I'm going to pray for more information on this and see if actually my belief system is incorrect, right? And then all of a sudden, you get access to more information, right? So to me, that's a huge part of success on this path, because when we're locked into our arrogance, when we're locked into the idea that we know, when we're locked into, even if it's like scientific journals telling us, like we just think that because we've read 5 million scientific journals that we know. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe the scientific journals are wrong, right? So when you open yourself and your belief system, to me, that is, one, you're inviting more information from the universe. And I don't know that there's actually more of a higher success than that, period, because I believe we're eternal beings and we need that humility to make it through this side and even the other side, right? Is that we don't know. And so success to me is opening to what we don't know. And so this path there's a lot of success coming from that perspective.
That's a great answer. I really love because people do get locked in all of these different belief systems, and they're stuck there until they can really open up. And
and just to finish that, Luke,
yeah,
that is the fastest path to success, right?
opening up.
Opening up and realizing we don't know, and letting the new information come in. And the more we open to that, the more new information is going to flood in, and then we have more information to make better decisions with.
Escape the traps. I love it. Those traps that you were talking about. Escape them, and then you are successful in every way. Fantastic. I want to switch gears for a second, and you have an upcoming workshop that I would love to hear a little bit more about that, and our viewers would like to hear a little bit more about that. Can you enlighten us on that?
Sure. Well, I mean, we have with us today Bernard, who is like one of my favorite people on the planet. He's just got an incredible brain, and I feel so blessed to have him as a working partner in the program that we're developing. Bernard is the main teacher in that program, or sharer of information, let's say, teacher. And the program that we have, well, actually we have an ongoing program, if you don't mind, two very important programs. One is we have an ongoing program now that's a 10 to 12 week, depending on how much time and effort you put in those 10 to 12 weeks, could take you 6 months. But the program is built over 10 to 12 weeks that walks people through, basically being completely unprotected in terms of self-governance and contracting with the system, to having a complete foundation in place for yourself that walks you through not only the foundational paperwork that you need, but the knowledge that you need. We're very big on educating and not just giving you the forms, right? It's about developing your substance inside to stand behind the forms. And so this is a program where you end up with a family trust and an unincorporated association. And there's reasons why you have those two entities, which I'm sure Bernard's going to get into with you. And so this is a 10-week course that basically walks you through how to, identify that you're not the identity that the government gives you. So you're not that birth certificate, you're not your social insurance number, even though those names are on there and it resembles you as a man or woman. That's not who you are. So it's a full understanding of how to protect that name, how to basically kind of take control of that name, how to manage that name, how to go into contract, and how to set up the foundational entities that you need in order to manage your name, which is a business, or take your business, your actual physical business, into what we would call the private, but we don't really call it the private, but the equivalent would be the private, onto the unincorporated side. So we have the incorporated side and the unincorporated side. So that's a 10 to 12 week course that walks people through that. And then the other course that we have coming up, which I just want to mention because I feel like it's really important, is a land protection course. So this is going to be a 4-part webinar series, about 2 hours per webinar, that's going to walk people through the experience of not only the experience, but the mechanics of buying property, right? So buying property, the mechanics that take place in that we're not necessarily aware of, and how not being aware of it makes you a tenant on your property, even though you think you're the owner because you've paid off $1 million mortgage, right? You're still listed as a tenant on that property, and the government and the bank, or not necessarily the government, the bank is still the registered owner, or the title company is the registered owner on that property. And so again, this course is being led by Bernard, and this is going to walk people through the steps they need to take, fairly simple steps, 3 or 4 steps that they need to do that shifts that shifts that so that your land is protected with you as the owner.
Well, thank you very much for all that information, Angela.
Yeah.
I hope everybody was taking notes. We're at the end of the show, we're gonna let everybody know what's the next steps to take to do that. So we're gonna switch over to Bernard now, and we'll get him started on really introducing himself and speaking of how he got involved in all of this fantastic journey.
Hi, Luke. Hi, team. Hi, viewers out there. And my name is Bernard, Director of Landing Interest for Estates Foundation, aka Life Foundation. And I got involved 20 years ago, and to get involved in something that I did. I was not planning that this was going to be part of my career or anything like that. But once it got going, I found it very difficult to transition out of it. And at the time, I was a school teacher. I taught figure drawing, color theory, and some other host of art classes at a secondary institute. So I won't say who they are, but after college, or college range, or after high school. And so I ran into a situation, we'll call it a hardship, just like everybody else has been going through in the last 3 years. And I decided to do something about it. And so you can say that I had a 20-year head start. And I wouldn't say that was my aha moment, that's for sure. But I really got angry. I got angry enough where I wished to do something about it. And so I did. And nothing happened at first. Nothing happened. And I was reaching for a whole bunch of straws, like a lot of people do. And so something gave. I submitted a certain type of a document, and then a lawyer showed up. And I was dealing with a lawyer at the time. And then I thought it was okay. And my idea at the time was I was not planning on doing any of this stuff at all. And so about a year as we were dealing with the case, a second incident occurred. A second sort of trauma occurred. And I took it on as like, well, I need to learn this. It's like maybe the universe or God is like, I'm not going to let you get away with this. You're going to need to learn this. And granted, for like 15 years, I had no idea why I was doing any of it. It wasn't any fun. I wasn't making any money. People were telling me to stop. I wasn't getting a lot of wins. It was very difficult. I was in and out of court helping people. It was very stressful. And so, but what was happening in terms of little wins was that I got a lot of knowledge, and I started communicating with the different government agencies. So I was from Alberta. I moved over to BC. So I was working both with these two third-party government contractors and trying to get through. So in Alberta, there's a process of a life estate that one can apply for. So that was an avenue in learning more about the system. And so once you get on board, not only do you have to read and learn about things, but you have to try things. And that activity was really revealing for me. And it's the activity that showed me that something was very real about this process. And in short, I'll simplify that process with, I produce some paperwork, and I would attach a silver coin to the paperwork and send it off. And they would retain all the paperwork and send me the silver coin back. And so I played this game back and forth for a while until they send me the wrong coin. And that kind of got me upset that I thought they didn't know what they were doing, or I just thought they were incompetent. So I read the procedural manual in Alberta for land titles. So procedure manual, you can look it up, for transfers, stuff like that. And in the transfer, I discovered that there was a book, Law of Real Property, that they were using, and they were using edition 3. So I went into, I bought the book, I read that book, and I quoted some aspects of the book, And I wrote up a report and I sent them a report, and I sent the report 8 different ways, maybe 10. And I registered, mailed 8 of them with silver coins. And it was a report. And the report was, I thought in my mind, if they couldn't keep up with private people trying to claim their estate back, this is through the government, then maybe they need people like myself to give them the idea that they need to create a registry for maybe private property owners so that they could manage their bookkeeping a little bit better for this type of a procedure. And I sent off 8 registered mail, all with silver coins. And all of them kept it, all to different departments, and they all returned the silver coin with the exception of one specific department. That was the FOIPA, Freedom of Information Protection Agency. Everything back. Experience taught me that the idea of creating a registry in a foundation for private property owners, for people who are really involved in this process, who really wish to take the process all the way to the end point, they were going to need some kind of, not just a registry in order to prove their standing, but they were also going to need an educational platform. So Life Foundation, and you can find Life Foundation at landinginterest.com. There's really nothing on the website. It will be built, but right now we're just building the bottom end. So I thought that it would be great to have Life Foundation produce programs, different types of programs, and work with as many people that were in alignment with the general concept of commerce and how commerce works. Although commerce is called a different term by whatever group you're dealing with, at the end of the day, if you take the emotions out of it, you're just dealing with business. And once you can deal with it from a business position, then it's kind of easy to see who is in what position or who's on what bases and what bases you need to hit the ball in order to get to or bring anybody else home, as a metaphor. So Life Foundation as a business came out of some of these procedures that I was doing and making an attempt to gather information so that when the time was right, we could deliver some of these deliverables or products to other people. And then there would be a registry so that when they did their own process, they too would be able to have a place to lodge their information. And in the future, that registry can serve as a host of different things. But more importantly, it's an educational forum with different programs, and Life Foundation works with SBD and other businesses in order to help programming so that we can get a base educational program going. Because without the education, without the program, then we're not at the level of an adult in terms of how the system views us. We are at the level of children. So that's my background. That's where I've come from, and I've been doing that. This will be my 20th year, I think, my 20th year. So.
Well, that's a very interesting story. One of our viewers has asked, what is the significance of the silver coin, getting the silver coin back?
Okay, so that's a great question. So I'm going to explain it in the idea of making it an application for a birth certificate. Although there's no silver coin in this example, the principles in this example, we're going to extract those principles from it. So, for example, it costs money to file for a birth certificate. Even if you're having a new baby, it's going to cost you some money. So there's the form. It's not your form, but you fill it out regardless. And then you attach the money to it. So those are two separate aspects of a contract. One is a lawful part of the contract, and the other one is the legal part of the contract. Together, when you flush those two things together, you get a title that's known as a grantee. Not a guarantee, Grantee, a grantee. And a grantee is somebody who has lawful and legal title. In this birth certificate process, what you're doing is you're giving up both. Because the original is yours. In fact, you could actually just send a photocopy of the application that you filled out and keep the original. You could just do that and with the money, but you send both out. And then a few weeks later, what happens is that you get something back in the mail, and what you get back is you get the legal description, or do you get the lawful description? What do you get back? So they keep the lawful you writing down on their form. That's the application. And then you paid with the legal tender, and then they return to you back a certificate, and that certificate is legal. So in the same principle of the silver coin is not legal tender, it's lawful tender. That's number one. And so I applied with some forms, and I got notary forms, transfer forms. So those forms would constitute as legal, especially if there's a notary seal on them, they're legal. So I put those two things together and I sent it off, and they returned back to me the lawful. So in that transaction, what I was looking for lawful recognition of my application, my process. So they were supposed to retain the legal title and hand back over the lawful title. And so the silver coin is symbolic of them returning the lawful title and keeping and holding on to the legal title. So that's the example or the significance in that particular story. There's more around it, but I think that's enough.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to kind of another question that a lot of our viewers, some know, more than not, the people that are on today know, but for the viewers that are coming, what can you tell us in like simple terms what the legal fiction referred to as the straw man is?
Okay, so the legal fiction as the straw man. So, first of all, legal fiction is a word, and then straw man is another word. And so the term straw man, we were speaking earlier, Angela and I believe comes from the movie The Wizard of Oz, because The Wizard of Oz is a movie in some people's mind that is a representation and an explanation of the legal system. Okay, so the straw man didn't have a brain. He didn't have a brain. Okay, he didn't have a brain. And in this game, we need brains, okay? So depending on who you go to, they're going to have different terminologies for this straw man. But what the straw man really is it's a vessel. So because we're dealing with the language of business, the language of commerce, we have to use commercial language and commercial terms. So what is the straw man in these commercial terms? Well, first of all, it's a vessel. It's a corporation. It's a corpse. It's a corporate body. It's a body. So in relationship to yourself, it is the body that is the representation of yourself, who is supposed to be the authorized representative or the administrator for this vessel. So now, the reason why I'm making this distinction is because the lawful man or the real man and the corporations, they don't live on the same side of the fence or the same side of bookkeeping. Okay, so essentially, there's different levels of vessels that one can get. But the way the game works is your first straw man, as people like to call it, or that vessel that is the representation of yourself, better known as your estate. That one is first created when you come into the country, or they take your old birth certificate from another country and then they give you a new sort of country citizenship or identification. If you're born, this is where this straw man comes up. But this straw man that comes up, that's not necessarily your straw man. It's a straw man that when it's issued, they will tell you that it belongs to us. They will tell you that if you ask. But you are the representation of it, and that straw man is the full potential of how much money that entity with yourself can make, or how much debt with yourself can make in that commercial system. So the last thing is, the more we learn about the business language and the business terminology between this vessel the easier it's going to be for us to manage the debts or the assets for this so-called straw man.
That's a very good explanation. I haven't heard it in that way before. I love hearing it in different perceptions. But yeah, it's fantastic, fantastic information you're sharing with us today, Bernard. Can I touch a bit about, and you could go as deep as you want with it, about what is an incorporation, an unincorporation? My bad, an unincorporation.
Okay, this is great. And I'm following some of the questions on the side too, so I'm keeping that in the back of my mind. But so an incorporation and an unincorporation, these are two, again, terms that you're going to find in business. And so people may an unincorporation is a company that's been dissolved, and that's not the case. So an incorporation is a business, and there's different types, we'll get into them, that is on, we'll call it the right side of bookkeeping, okay? And then we'll say that the unincorporation is on the other side of bookkeeping. So if you have both of these businesses on both sides of bookkeeping, then consider yourself to be in control of full spectrum accounting. So you have access to both sides of the ledger. But specifically the incorporation, this is an entity that functions on the public side of bookkeeping that is responsible for, let's say, the competitive nature of this realm. So for profits or competitive based businesses, they are incorporated. Not for profit are not necessarily competitive. They're not competing because their shareholders are different, but they are still incorporated. So the difference between those two are going to be the tax bracket. One's going to have a higher threshold of taxation that they pay up. The other one's going to have a lower threshold. So this is the business that you have on the right side of bookkeeping. Now we move over to the left side. Now we're dealing with an unincorporated entity. So this unincorporated entity is also known by another name, which is an unincorporated association, or a UA. And currently speaking, a lot of people are speaking of PMAs, private member associations, in place of a UA. But in the business banking term, it's a UA. On the banking platforms, services that they offer on their websites, you will find that a lot of banks offer unincorporated associations. So clearly, they are entities that are for real. The nature of these UAs are benevolent in nature. So they're not out there to compete, hence the association part. And so because their nature is different, the tax bracket that they fall into is two tax brackets, which is they don't have an obligation to report and they don't have an obligation to file. Maybe they're the same thing, but they don't have any of these two obligations. So any entity on the right side of bookkeeping, they have these obligations to report. And then the last thing between the UA is that one can get a UA, whether it's in Australia, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in the US and Canada, you can get a UA just about anywhere on the globe. That's number one. Number two, it's typically the governmental ordinance departments or the third-party government contractors. I'm making an effort not to say government. Their websites are going to have these options for you. So there's a way that you can get a UA in Canada, and it qualifies as a tax-exempt business number. Now you have your registration, and then of course the program that is led by Angela's team builds documentations around that. And then of course there's coaching and guidance to go into the bank and to assist the advisors, because they may not know. Many people aren't going into the banks to get these accounts, so that there's some patience and just some workability with the advisors so that the account is acquired without any stress or hesitation.
Great. Maybe I got ahead of myself for the viewers. Can you tell us a little bit more the difference between the public and the private side?
I can, and so I'm also going to invite Angela to speak to this as well.
Sounds good.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to incorporate some of the questions that I'm hearing, just so that I don't miss any of them, we don't run out of time, into some of the questions that you're asking too. So what is the difference between the public and the private? And so first we're going to look at it from a business perspective. Then we're going to look outside of that, because we use these terms for ourselves. We borrow these terms and we say, oh, we're private or we're public. We'll do that secondly. But the private and the public literally are for entities or corps or things or businesses. Businesses that have an obligation to pay taxes and obligations to not pay taxes. So let's go into an example, okay? So let's imagine that you have a lawsuit with a government agency, third-party government agency. We'll say, for lack of a better agency, we'll just use the police. And so you have a lawsuit against the police as an example. If you're experienced, you'll know that you can't sue the police directly. You have to sue the city. So the question is, why can't you sue this business directly? Well, a lot of government organizations are tax exempt. They don't pay the taxes. So does that mean that they are also in the private? Or better yet, does it mean that they are operating both sides of bookkeeping? They have a better knowledge of bookkeeping than the rest of us do. And so typically you sue the city's acting as the incorporation, and the police are the security forces for the city. And so you sue the city, and then you can sue the police personally or individually, but not the whole entire police. And that speaks to the qualifications or the classification of that entity, the police entity. I believe that they're ran under an association or some kind of a charity. And the joke that I make is that, hey, these charities are going around beating people up. That's a bad joke, but you can laugh at it if you want. But that's a good example of private and public. So private and public are, if you have an incorporation, maybe it's just your personal bank account. So we'll look at the bank account. So it's not a sole proprietor, but the bank account is labeled as a retail account if you read the Bank Act. So that's a commercial account. That's a commercial account. So that commercial account is subject to taxation. You might think, I don't remember paying taxes on my personal account. But the banks, they have the right to declare that you have the tax burden away from themselves. This is the reason why these types of bank accounts on the public versus the private, this is the reason why they get seized. They get seized because I paused there, but because I didn't want to scare people, but they're not typically your accounts. And there's a reason why they're not your accounts, but they belong to the greater public organizations that run the public realm or the commercial sphere, that public realm. If you wish to control your own accounting, you might think to get yourself a tax exempt business account that you can get from the tax office in Australia, in the US, in Canada, in other parts of the world. This is where you would get it. And then build the businesses, the structure around it, and then go into the bank. Now you have your own entity that is outside of taxation and also outside of other things as well. But again, if it's a personal account and it gets seized because it's on the public side. And even if it's an incorporation, it's going to get seized because it's on the public side of bookkeeping. And the public side, to be simple and to pass it off to Angela, is that is typically the realm where many things are abandoned. They are abandoned because we haven't made the proper claim to it. And so one of the questions that was asked is making a claim for the record of birth, or is the lawful title that people are referring to as getting the original record of birth. So not necessarily, because again, we're still dealing with commerce, and there's a process you want to take to get your records of birth, but we can talk about that in a different podcast. But public, private, taxation, no taxation, public is ran by the whole entire judicial system, and typically it's run on presumption, and everything in that realm is abandoned. So there's a way to capture it, but public, private. But we need both sides of the ledger. Angela, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that was a really great explanation. And the only thing I would add to that is generally, my experience, people looking down what we believe is a sovereign path is we run into these words, public and private. And so, private is when you're at home having dinner with your family, right? Public is, and so you're referring to, the husband and wife would refer to themselves by the first name. Your children would be calling you mom and dad. If you're a teacher, when you go to school, you're now, Mr. or Mrs., and you're the teacher, and that's a title, and that's in the public. So that's a public title, versus when that same teacher goes home, the children aren't calling them Mr. and Mrs. last name. They're saying mom or dad, right? So differentiation between a very practical, public-private distinction. Bernard and myself could go out for lunch, and we could be, say, at Earl's, and that's a corporation. So that's a public environment, not just by location, but because it is a corporation and we're in the entity enjoying a meal together. But we could be having a private conversation or a private agreement between us. So we could be private and in a public place at the same time. However, in terms of self-governance and this body of work, the easiest way that I explain it is that anytime you're showing up with your identification, so whether it's your birth certificate, your passport, your services card, or your social insurance number, anytime you're using that entity, you are entering the public. So I think that you did a really great job of a bigger explanation, and I'm just going to add that little point of simplicity.
Fantastic. Bernard, because there's only a few minutes left, what are the first action steps that any of our viewers can take to start taking the process into the sovereignty by design?
That's a great question. So, and it's not like any real hard reading or anything like that. It's really just remembering that there's remedy and there's solution, and that God would not put you here without that. That's really important. There is. And then if you have a lot of anger, realize that that's going to be blocking you. It's going to be a block to your thinking. And so the goal is you have emotions and you have thoughts, and you got to figure out who's leading what. I say the man and the woman, the man being the brain, the woman being the heart, and you got to find a neutral ground. So that's the first thing that people need to do, is that know that there's remedy. The second thing is that they got to be willing to do hard work. And so most people are relying on other people doing the work for them. If it's not, you call the police because you want to charge somebody, and then when the police leave, you tell yourself that you charged them, but you gave away your charge to the police. So doing the hard work is, if you want to charge them, you take out a civil claim against that man or woman. And so that you don't give your commission away over to the police, right? So that's knowing that you got to participate in knowing the thing, and that's what we're not doing. And so we could assist, but we can't do the work for you, because first of all, it would just be, against the reason why God put you here. God put you here because it is hard. You put yourself here with God's permission because it is hard. But now that it's hard and you found a variety of other people that know it's hard, work together with them and know that there's a remedy. And I could say a lot of things which are symbolic, but they apply in commerce. And because they're symbolic, they're going to go over your head until you learn that they relate to commerce. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Angela.
Yeah, I would say that the first steps into moving through what we're talking about, getting onto the self-governance path from our perspective, or my perspective, of course, is to go to sovereignbydesign.com, and there's actually 2 or 3 foundational programs that are a great starting point that explain a lot about the system, a lot about the history of this and the difference between private and public, so that you've got a little bit of foundational knowledge before engaging in processes. And then I would say from my perspective that Sovereign by Design's first real foundational program is the PMA and banking structuring program that we have, and with the knowledge and understanding that our names are businesses. So even if you don't have a business, you do, because your name is, every time you walk out of your house and you go and get into your vehicle and you start driving, you are in commerce because you're attached to that public entity, your identification. If you don't have an awareness that you're not attached to that, and you haven't made claims that you're not attached to that, and you're not that entity, then you are that entity. And so that program, the PMA structuring program, is for all individuals who wish to start to take control of their estate, of managing that corporate entity that you're given as a birth certificate or a social insurance number, how to move through life managing that entity, and when you need it, you have the foundation in place to reach the remedies that you may need if you get a ticket, or you get a fine, or you get into a court action, or whatever it is. There's force coming down on you because you're not wearing a mask, or you're whatever the situation's coming from out there in the business world coming at you. This program sets your foundation and helps you stand in your square with the education and the knowledge of making that separation and creating those claims. One of the questions that I saw was, is there a quick way to discharge a ticket or to stop a court case dead in its tracks? Absolutely there is, right? There absolutely is. Bernard's done it many times. I've just recently offset a few tickets myself. Very simple process, but simple because, I've done some work and I know where I'm standing. And so I would say that is a great starting place, is go to Sovereign by Design, take the free courses that are on there, and then if you're ready to jump into the PMA structuring, that's a great next step.
I just want to add before we go that once a man or a woman goes through the process that we're offering, is there some kind of identification that is used for self-governing individuals? And so the answer is definitely yes, but everybody out there who's listening to this really needs to go out and look to see if there's any rule that says or prevents them from even making their own identification. So you have the right to make your own ID. That's first and foremost. The program that we offer, because you're setting up new businesses, you should think about getting yourself a business ID. And if that business has the likeness to your legal fiction, to your strawman, but now you control it because it's a private benevolent entity, definitely create an ID for your new business. And now you have the paperwork and your ID together. And when you show that in public to a police officer, they're going to know that they can't contract with that.
How about that for a happy ending? Well, thank you guys for joining us today. Bernard, Angela, we appreciate all the info you gave us today. We ran just a little bit over time, but that's fantastic because it's our, we really want to bring all the information to the show, and we would love to have you on a show in the near future to discuss this even more, because I know there was a lot of questions that people are asking and people want to know. So we will answer all your questions on the, we'll email you some answers and everything. So, tune in next week for another episode of the WTF Show, where we talk about wealth, truth, and faith.